Hi, I am sharing a book with you that I hope you will find as heartwarming as I do. It is a very sweet book called The Frank Show. There are a couple wonderful characters in this book, most of all, Frank. And I hope you guys just find the lesson that this little boy learns from Frank to be as sweet as I do. And as we think about this story and everything that's happening in the week this week, we can think about who do we need to honor and celebrate in our lives or in our community. And what Frank can teach us about those people that we need to celebrate. So I would like to share with you this book called The Frank Show by David Mackintosh. This says at the top, kind of has a subtitle, Grandpa Frank is a real class act. I love this so much. Some of you may know I was very, very close to my grandpa, and I love this book thinking about what this little guy learns from his grandpa as he gets to bring him for show and tell. I will tell you a funny story because I got to bring my grandpa to Grandparents' Day at my elementary school when I was in about third grade, and he sat down on the benches just like we have in our lunchroom here and fell right off the back of it sitting down, and he and I used to laugh about that all the time of how he thought he embarrassed me at school coming and falling off the bench at lunch, but he never embarrassed me. But sometimes we think sometimes our parents or grandparents can be a little embarrassing until we really learn the very cool things about them. So I hope you'll like what this little boy learns about Grandpa Frank. Here we go. The Frank Show. My grandpa's name is Frank. Frank lives at our house and he's always around. Now, why do you think the author, puts the little boy in color and draws Grandpa Frank like this, right? Black and white with some curious faces and things going on. Frank talks about what things were like when he was a boy my age. He says things were a lot tougher back then. There's a dinosaur. Frank says that it was a lot quieter when he was my age. You could hear yourself think, he yells. My teacher has asked us to talk about a member of our family for show and tell on Friday. We can choose one person and talk for 1 minute about the things they like and what kind of person they are. I asked Mom if I can talk about her, but she says that she is very busy and that I should speak to my father when he gets off the phone. Dad says, why don't I talk about Minnie, my sister? Minnie won't make a good subject to talk about, so I tell him I'll think about it. The only person left is Frank, but Frank is just a grandpa. Frank always says, these days there are too many gadgets and gizmos. I prefer doing things the old-fashioned way. Hey, you guys don't know what this is, but it's called a typewriter. What we used before we had computers. Today, I told my teacher that Mom was very busy and Dad had had a very long day, so the only person left in my family to talk about was Frank, my grandpa. She said, fabulous, but I don't know about that. At home, Frank says he doesn't like fancy food. Plain and simple, that's me, he reckons. I wonder if there is anything about Frank that will make my talk interesting. On Tuesday at the barber shop, Frank says he only needs to get his hair cut once a year and he doesn't trust barbers. He says, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. I can do without their input. And I just have mine tidied up. My friend Tom says that his uncle Marlon is a musician who plays drums on the radio. Tom says he's allowed to bring his drumsticks on Friday. His uncle is cool. Pretty cool. That night, I asked Frank if he can play a musical instrument, maybe the electric guitar. Frank says, today's music is just noise and you can't understand the words. He only likes listening to his music and says, they don't make them like that anymore. Barbara Bailey told me that she's going to bring a photo of her grandma's deluxe mobility scooter. She's a retiree and secretary of her bridge club. Maybe I should take a photo of Frank? That night, I asked Frank why he doesn't drive a scooter or play bridge. Frank says, doctors speak a lot of mumbo jumbo and bridge is dull as old dishwater. He doesn't trust doctors as far as he can throw them, which isn't far on account of his arm and one of his hips. Christian's dad is a comedian on TV who makes everyone laugh. Paolo's mom is Italian and knows all about Italian and can speak Italian. Faye's cousin tells you if your bag's too heavy at the airport. Donnie's dad works in a potato chip factory. Saul's aunt swam the English Channel. Hugo's stepbrother has a sports car with an 8-ball gear shift knob. My grandpa's arm hurts when it's about to rain. That's all I can think to say about Frank. Okay, have you ever had one of these moments, right? It seems like all these kids have this cool stuff and he just feels like, what's Frank gonna share? I wish I could choose Tom. He's my age and I've known him since January. Tom carries a full deck of Modern Marvels flashcards in his back pocket, and I'm the only other person he lets hold them. He's smaller than me, but that doesn't matter when you're best friends. Tom asked me why I chose Frank for my talk, because Frank's just a grandpa. I didn't know what to say, so now Tom and me aren't speaking. On the way home, I don't care if Tom thinks Frank isn't a good show and tell. Tom doesn't know Frank like I do and doesn't even live at my house with my family. What does he know? But then Tom might be right, because everyone has someone interesting to talk about. And Frank is, well, just my grandpa. My grandpa doesn't always like the way things are, and he always does things his way. He doesn't like noise or today's music or gadgets and gizmos or new things or haircuts or weather or doctors or any sort of ice cream that isn't vanilla. And today I have to talk all about him for a full minute. How do you think this is going to go? Do you have an idea? Are we going to be surprised? Is it going to be a disaster? What do you think he's going to learn about Grandpa? Because he's certainly worried, right? Look how big the author wrote all of his words because he was so worried about bringing Grandpa Frank. In class, everyone is excited. They have all spoken for a full minute each about a member of their family, even Clive Martin. Then we all have to look out of the window to see Hannah's mom's company car. Everyone in my class has someone interesting to show and tell. But now it's my turn to talk about... Look at him. Frank. I tell them everything I know about Frank, how Frank doesn't like noise or today's music or gadgets and gizmos or new things or haircuts or weather or doctors or anything but vanilla, and about how everything was a lot tougher when he was a boy my age. And that's it. I've run out of the things that I can say about Frank, and everyone is looking straight at me when Frank begins to tell a story about how he led an army in a charge across a muddy battlefield with bullets whistling all around like African bees, and how the whole way he didn't miss a single note on his bugle, except when an explosion made him play a sharp instead of a flat, and how he gave his last drop of water to a thirsty horse and captured 100 enemy soldiers with nothing but his wit and brute force, and how later he and his buddies had a green tattoo put on their arms to remember that day. Oh, can you believe that? Look, he's a war hero. His grandson didn't even know all of this. Look at that experience. How cool is that? Frank explains how he has a piece of metal left in his elbow from when he was in the war. And every time it's about to rain, I know, because my arm goes numb. Sheldon Rovey asks if getting a blurry tattoo hurts, and Frank winks and says, "You bet it did." And then we all have lunch. And everybody cheered for my grandpa, Frank, and me. Okay, look at them having lunch. Every kid is asking him stuff. You can't see it, but around every kid on lunch, it says, he is older than all of our birthdays added up. He has a rubber band ball that is 28 years old. He keeps a real Japanese sword under his bed. He can't smell anything because of his amateur boxing career. He keeps a folded $50 bill in his shoe and a double-headed coin in his hip pocket. He hasn't bought a new pair of pants in 10 years. He can catch a fly with his bare hand. and let it go. He has a special backup hearing aid that doesn't use batteries. My teacher is just his type. He carries colored combs in his pocket, and you can see them sticking up behind all of the pens. Look at Grandpa Frank sitting at the lunch table, just like my Grandpa Warren, sharing all his stories. On the way home, Tom asked if he could visit Frank and me at our house one day, and I said, "You bet you can." The Frank Show. Now, I got to tell you that I read this for several reasons. Okay. One, fun story, right? Two, sometimes it's really important to get to know somebody's story. Yeah. Like how he just thought he was just grumpy grandpa. But here's the amazing thing. Grandpa is a war veteran, lived an amazing life, had all these stories to share with him, just needed somebody to ask. Yeah. And we are about to have Veterans Day. And I want to make sure that if you think you know or have a veteran in your life, or would like to find somebody that you could write a letter to or get some information, it is really important to all of us that we honor the veterans in our lives and the work that they've done to keep us safe and our country safe. And they deserve to have their story heard because they're heroes and exciting, just like Grandpa Frank. Just like my Grandpa Warren was also in the war and got shot down from an airplane in the middle of the war and had to survive by going across the country with his whole crew getting shot out of the airplane. And they all survived, right? Amazing. Great stories that I got to learn from my Grandpa Warren. I hope you'll make sure that you think of maybe who the Franks are in your world. Make sure you ask them to tell them your story. Okay? Have a great day.